The first episode begins with Melissa putting on makeup. She tells Hazel, "Happy birthday." Max is surprised by the number of presents Hazel has. Meanwhile, Ben finishes his run and returns home, picking up the mail before going inside. Hazel receives a card and asks her mom what Chilliwack means. Melissa claims she doesn't know who the card is from. The card also includes a creepy drawing. When Hazel asks more questions, Melissa tries to brush them off. She hides the card in a safe with others. Ben checks on her before she leaves for work. At work, Melissa greets Stuart and asks why Ivy Campbell was so upset. Stuart suggests it's the same old drama. He mentions a mother from Colorado whose daughter was murdered last year. The mother is now saying she won't go on the show. Ivy comes in and tells Melissa that the woman's name is Kathy Weaver. Melissa agrees to try and calm her down. While working on Kathy's makeup, Melissa tries to convince her to go through with the show. She admits she was supposed to talk Kathy into it, but she doesn't have any personal stake in the situation. Kathy says her daughter was murdered, and the police have nothing. She can't think of another way to get people to care. Her husband thinks appearing on the show makes them look desperate. Melissa reassures her, saying any mother would be desperate in her situation. Melissa receives a message from her daughter, asking about her crazy uncle and Chilliwack. Visibly upset, Melissa tells Kathy that the person who killed her daughter needs to pay. Ivy pulls Melissa aside, concerned that they'll lose Kathy. But Kathy returns and says she's ready to go on. After work, Melissa stops at the store to pick up birthday candles. While shopping, she remembers something when she sees a roll of tape. That night, she celebrates Hazel's birthday with the family. She tells Ben he can go for a run while she cleans up. Once alone, Melissa looks up the Oregon Department of Corrections website and finds contact information for an inmate. She steps outside to make a call but is interrupted by her new neighbor, Renee. Frustrated, she tells the inmate to stay out of her life and to stop writing letters. She threatens to make his life miserable if he doesn't. At work the next day, Stuart tells Melissa that Kathy had the audience in tears. She then learns that Dr. Gregg wants to speak with her. When she goes to his office, he introduces her to John, a lawyer. Ivy arrives a bit later. Dr. Gregg asks Ivy what she knows about the Happy Face killer. Melissa is shocked to learn that the killer called the show earlier that day, claiming to have information about a murder. However, he would only speak to Dr. Gregg and Melissa. When Dr. Gregg questions why he would choose her, Melissa is forced to confess the killer is her father. Keith Hunter Jesperson calls in and asks for Melissa. He claims he just wants the truth to reach the media. Keith says he hid a murder from the police, though Melissa doesn't believe him. Before hanging up, he insists he'll only tell her in person. Ivy urges Melissa to visit him the next morning. Melissa reveals she has visited him twice before, once when she was 15 after his arrest and again when she was pregnant. Neither visit helped. Her husband, Ben, knows about her father, but he told their kids that her dad is dead. Ivy argues that speaking to Keith might provide closure for grieving families. At home, Melissa looks through Keith's letters and pictures. In a flashback, she rushes to see her father when he returns home from work. They watch America's Most Wanted together. In the present, Ben finds Melissa looking at the old photos. He believes Keith is manipulating her. But Melissa worries that Keith will never leave them alone unless she faces him. Ben accuses her of still loving her father. The next day, Ivy takes Melissa to the prison to see Keith. Melissa asks him to sign a release form, but he hesitates, wondering if his lawyer should review it first. Then, Keith asks if she remembers Chilliwack and reminisces about them swimming together. Ivy asks about the supposed 9th victim and urges Keith to sign the release. Melissa believes this is just a ploy to get her to visit. Keith fears that if he tells her the victim's name, she'll disappear for another 15 years. A guard tells Keith to sign the form or return to his cell. He signs it, adding a smiley face at the bottom. During the conversation, Melissa accidentally calls Keith Dad. He seizes on this, saying she'll always be his little girl. Keith then makes a chilling claim: every time he killed a woman, Melissa received a present. He even says he bought her a trampoline after his 9th victim, the last gift he ever gave her. Melissa, shaken, asks to use the bathroom. A guard questions whether she's sick like her father. Keith abruptly ends the interview. As Ivy keeps pressing for answers, Keith tells her to ask Missy, because she knows. Later, Ivy and Melissa go to a pub. Ivy insists that Keith said Missy knows. Melissa denies it. Ivy asks about the trampoline. Melissa insists she was 15 at the time. Ivy, disturbed, wonders if Melissa suppresses the dark details. That night, Melissa watches an old news report about her father and remembers something chilling. He once took her to a house that appeared in the report. She even stayed in a residence belonging to one of his victims. Looking up, she recalls blood on a ceiling fan. But Keith, standing behind her, had laughed it off, claiming it was just spaghetti sauce. The next day, Melissa and Ivy visit her mother, June. She isn't home, but they find a scratched-out picture of Melissa with Brendan. When June returns, she immediately knows Melissa has been to see Keith. June tells Melissa that years ago, she got a disturbing phone call. The man on the line described exactly what she was wearing, down to the details of her nightgown. She believes Keith was behind it, having sent someone to watch her. She insists Keith is still dangerous. Ivy interrupts to show Melissa something shocking: the trampoline is still outside. They notice a store name, Longhorn Sporting Goods in Denton, Texas. Melissa and Ivy confront Keith about Texas. He admits he was there and met a bartender who was hitchhiking. He says she relaxed once she realized he had daughters. She played guitar and sang, hoping to be a star. They had sex, but he insists he never raped her. However, he does admit to strangling her. He describes the moment she died, the smell, and how she suddenly coughed when he thought she was gone. Panicking, he hit her over the head with a dog wrench. He then dumped her body under a bridge, bought a trampoline, and drove straight to Melissa. Keith tells Melissa they are the same, she just pretends to be different. He insists she benefited from every woman he killed. Melissa suddenly remembers a guitar pick she saw at a motel years ago. She calls Ben and asks him to open her safe. When he finds it, he reads the words, Whiskey River. Melissa immediately recognizes it. It's the name of a bar in Texas. Meanwhile, Hazel overhears their conversation and learns the truth: her grandfather is the Happy Face Killer. Ivy does some research and finds out about Heather Richmond, a woman murdered on February 18, 1995. However, her boyfriend, Elijah Carter, was convicted and remains on death row. Meanwhile, Hazel, still in shock, continues searching online, trying to uncover the full truth about Keith Jesperson.